Something to talk about live. My name is Liz Owen. My pronouns are she, her. I am the Director of Communications at PFLAG National. It's great to have you with us again for our weekly live show. We have a fantastic conversation coming today, so I'm not going to waste any time. And instead, I'm going to bring on my colleague, Jean Marie Nevada, our host of our show.
Everybody, welcome to Something to Talk About Live. My name is Jean Marie Nevada. My pronouns are she, and if you use Spanish, ella. And every single week we get together to talk about something related to LGBTQ equality. So this week we have kind of an interesting conversation to have and a really interesting twist on our normal article. So for those of you who join us, you know that we typically grab a news article and use that as the basis for today's conversation. But today we're actually using a brand new PFLAG publication for our conversation today. And that publication is called At Ease, Support for Military Families with LGBTQ plus Children and Teens. And I'll be really honest with you, while there are many people in the military in my family, I do not directly come from a military family. So this was a little bit outside of my experience. And as I started reading the publication, it really helped me understand there were a whole lot of challenges, a whole lot of different kinds of experiences that families in this space were having. And it really helped me kind of get excited about the ways that we could do a better job at supporting those families. So I really encourage you to check out the publication. We are going to scroll that link so you can download it from the PFLAG website. But to have our conversation today, I'd like to introduce two people. We have Liz Castro and her son, Enrique. Liz is a member of the PFLAG board. And they are exactly from one of those families that we are talking about. So with that, I'd love to bring in Liz and Enrique. Hello, Liz. Hey, Enrique. How is it going?
It's going good. How are you?
I am doing well. And I'm so excited about this conversation. You know, sometimes we talk about things where I have some background in it, and that's fun. But I really love the conversations where I get to hear about things that are so outside of what I have experienced. So I'm really grateful for you to both be here. So maybe we can start by hearing sort of the basics of your story. So, you know, you're both part of a military family who happens to have someone who is a member of the LGBTQ plus community. So, Enrique, can we maybe start with you? What was on your mind when you came out to your family? So maybe what were you worried about? And was any of that specific to being a member of a military family?
Well, I could start with that it wasn't very specific to being a military family. And I think a lot of the concerns that I had are a lot of the concerns that everyone else has, especially when you come from a Hispanic family, that intersectionality between ethnicity, religion, and who I am. And that was, I had fear that I wouldn't be accepted by my family and by my parents and by my extended relatives for who I am. And, ultimately, when push came to shove, my parents, my brother, my cousins, my grandmothers, they were all there for me. And so I feel supported and loved by my family. But I know that a lot of people don't have that opportunity, don't have those resources and that support structure. And I feared that I wouldn't have that either.
Yeah. It really is challenging. And I do want to talk more about that intersectional piece of the conversation, because I think we need to acknowledge that this sounds and looks different in different communities for many reasons, and it's not just one singular reason. So Liz, tell me a little bit about your experience when Enrique came out.
So, and thank you for having us today. I think this is an important topic, and I think Enrique really actually defined it. I mean, it's a fear that of not being accepted, and it doesn't matter what your background is, whether you're a military family, a Catholic family, Baptist, whatever is your religion or ethnicity or background, that fear is always there, right? And as much as, we have a lot of friends that are very open, and they're like, we're open with our children. We have these conversations. They come to us with everything. Even in that environment where you think you have a very open communication with your child or your children, that's just always going to be there, that fear. First thing I thought was, okay, being the teacher, being a military spouse, okay, so what do we do now? Like, what are the next steps, right? And first thing we told Enrique was that we loved him no matter what. We accepted him for who he is and whatever he defined that to be. And the next question I asked him was, so how can we be supportive? What can we do to learn more, to be a little bit more educated about it? You know, it was a world that nor my husband or I were really familiar with. We have family members that were part of the LGBTQ, but we, as a parent, when you have a child, it changes things. It's a different perspective, right? And so, you know, I know that Enrique came out to his father first. He was afraid to disappoint me, I think. Enrique, if I'm using those words right.
Yeah.
And so I didn't feel hurt at all, but I felt really proud that Enrique felt comfortable enough to open up to his father and to come to his father first. You know, Sam being, you know, active duty Marine. I know Marines sometimes have that reputation of being tough and, you know, not compassionate, you know, just being hardcore, right? But Sam is an amazing father. And I think that act of Enrique coming out to his father first really proves that Sam has done a phenomenal job of establishing that relationship with our sons and just being an amazing father.
Thank you for that. I have to tell you, so many times with the story that we typically hear is I came out to mom first. So I'm so fascinated by this conversation. Enrique, when you were telling your dad, what sort of was your plan? Was it tell dad and then go to mom, or were you hoping that dad would talk to mom, or how did it unfold for you?
Well, so it was a bit tricky to navigate as a conversation. And one of the things that he told me and that he assured me would happen is that he wouldn't tell mom unless I wanted him to, unless I was ready. And because he understood how big of a deal this was for me to approach him, and he wanted to respect, you know, my right to come out to who I choose to. And, you know, it was a difficult conversation to have. And it's never easy. To be completely honest, I don't exactly remember the details. It was a very emotional moment.
Yeah. So, you know, one of the things that I found really interesting as I was reading that new PFLAG publication was that there are some challenges that are part of being a military family, especially one who's maybe living on base, when it comes to this conversation. So can we talk a little bit about what that looks like? Because one of the things that I found really interesting right in the beginning of the book, where there were a whole lot of acronyms explained to me, and now you need to know what this is. And as I read the publication, I kept going back and forth, and it made me realize how this could be a very different experience than somebody like me when I came out had. So Liz, maybe we can start with you as somebody who's a military wife, and knowing that military communities are a bit closed. I mean, you're spending a lot of time with the exact same people. What was on your mind as this experience was happening?
So we were living in San Antonio, Texas when Enrique came out, and we weren't living on post, on base. We were living out in town. The unit that we were with was a very small unit that my husband was with. So there really wasn't a lot of interaction with other military families on post. So I kind of was like, what do I do? Where do I go? How do I find support for my child? How to find support for me? And Enrique actually found Guest of Youth in San Antonio, right? And he's the one that was like, hey, this is where we need to go. But being on post, soon after that, we moved to Okinawa, Japan, right? Overseas, away from family and friends. And I was there wasn't really anything put in place there. Like there wasn't, you know, hey, there is an LGBTQ youth group, or there is a club at the school, or anything there in place for support. And I felt that I needed to be informed. Like, I need this information. Like, I need to know, how do I help my child? How do I help navigate anything that's getting ready to come before us? And I think, that's not very common. I mean, you have youth clubs, you have, a lot of Boy Scout troops or Scouts USA, Scouts Are Us Now group, Girl Scout troops. You have spouses clubs. There's a club for everything. But I think, now I think the military bases are starting to realize, hey, there is a need for this. There is a need to have an LGBTQ youth club or family support club. And I'm thinking that we are making progress and at least talking about it, that needs to be established. But a lot of times they don't even know where to start. I know as a parent, our number one concern is, supporting our child, making sure our child knows we love them, but also keeping them safe. We want to make sure that they're safe and they're protected. But that is one of the challenges. And also, on a military base, even though the Don't Ask, Don't Tell has been repealed, I think there's still a lot of old school thoughts and mentality about it. I think, we're making progress, but I think we have a whole lot more to go. I think being able to identify those resources either at that military installation or around that military in the community, what's available. And I think that's so important to have like a directory, where do we go? And which is one of the amazing things about PFLAG is that there are some that you can join virtually to find support, which I think is amazing. Now, since COVID and the pandemic, everything's gone virtual. But I think that is a challenge. And I think also some other families are a little hesitant to talk about their LGBTQ family, whether it's themselves or whether it's their child, because they're afraid of having some, retribution as far as their career goes. Is that going to affect my career? What is my command going to say? So I think we're making progress, but we're not 100% there. But I think that's one of the challenges, is just fear of not having resources for your family, and fear for your career. How is this going to affect your military career? I think that's still there.
Yeah, I and we can talk more about it, but I know that one of the things I found very interesting as I read the book was there was a section about, do you inform your chain of command what is going on? And I thought, what a very intimidating conversation that could be for every single reason that you just said. And that could really, really probably cause a lot of fear, especially as everything else is happening. You're moving around, you're facing new environments. So Enrique, on your side, so you came out, you were in San Antonio, then the family gets relocated to Okinawa. What was that experience like for you as a young queer person who suddenly found a very different environment going on?
Well, it was difficult to navigate on multiple levels. A new country, different language, and I was starting high school. So college was just around the corner. So there were a lot of different pressures that were on me at the time, and I had priorities to put in front of other things, all AP or honor classes. So it certainly wasn't a light load, and there was a lot of stress to go around. It wasn't easy. And I kind of had to put some things on the back burner. And one of those things was my sexual identity, so that I could focus on my education and my future, because that was the most pressing matter in that period of my life. Because if I couldn't handle those things, then I couldn't be where I am now at a university studying computer science and making headway for a career doing cybersecurity. So I had to prioritize. It wasn't pleasant, and it's not easy. But one of the things that I used to reassure myself is that my queerness doesn't define me. It's not the defining factor, and it's not everything who I am. I am more than the sum of my parts. And so while it is, an aspect that heavily influences my life, it isn't, I don't let it control my life, because I am who I am, and I'll be who I want to be.
I absolutely love that. And I also love it because I think it leads right into the next thing that I wanted to talk about. So none of us are just one identity. All of us are made up by a lot of different identities, some of which we come to, some of which we have adopted through different experiences. And that definitely changes the way we are seen and the ways in which we navigate the world around us. So since both of you mentioned it, I would love to talk about a little bit more as a Latino family, as a Catholic family. We have a lot of conversations about where this can be challenging, but also where that theme of family is the most important thing can very much work in your favor. So Liz, maybe we can start with you by talking about that aspect of the coming out process, how your racial and ethnic identity and religious beliefs influenced the experience that you were having.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because we knew my dad is from, Mexico. My mom's family, she was born and raised in Texas, in Galveston, Texas, but her father's from Honduras, so from Central America. So a little bit of a mixed background. Catholicism has always been, a religion. We grew up. I went to elementary Catholic school. I even taught religious education classes when I was in college, which prompted me to become an educator. And Sam and I were involved with our church heavily. And so one of the things that my mom has always told me, because we did have some LGBTQ family members, was, no matter what, God loves everybody. And, you don't know what the other person is struggling with, so you should never judge. And that's one of the things that I kept at the forefront always. And so it is tough to navigate, because there is, you don't know really how someone truly feels until it's right there in front of them and how they're going to react. And so I know that when Enrique first came out, and he told me he didn't want any of the extended family to know. My dad, he was worried about, my dad being not accepting him. He knows that his papa is very, traditional man from Mexico, and he was very strict with us growing up. So he was kind of worried about that acceptance. And so when he finally said, yes, you can tell the extended family, and I told my mom, and I said, Enrique's really worried about how his grandpa's going to react. And so when we told my dad, I'm going to get emotional. He said, he's my grandson, no matter what, and I will always love him. And so for me, that was such a relief, because that was my fear, that I was going to have to draw that line, and my husband and Sam and I always said, we will be there for our child. And if the extended family does not accept it, then that's them, and that's not us. That's on them. And so for me, it was the fear of our family not accepting Enrique. And therefore we would have to separate.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. So
okay.
That was our fear. That was my fear.
And it was a fear that didn't come to be realized, which I think is incredible. And I think so many people have stereotypes about the way these conversations are going to go. And so often they do not go that way. And Enrique, on your side of it, how did your identity, your racial, ethnic identity, and someone who was raised in a Catholic family play into your experience too?
Well, so it continues to play in a number of different ways. And one of that is that I attend a Marianist Catholic university. So I regularly take classes with individuals who are entering the priesthood or who are Marianist brothers. Sometimes I'm being taught classes by Marianist brothers. So the clergy is ever present on campus. And there's a divide. There's a gap that I have to cross in terms of bridging my identity with my faith. And that's a complex issue philosophically, politically, and it involves a large understanding of both the faith and who I am. And at some point, I have to decide that, while I consider myself Roman Catholic, there is a line. There's a line that I'll permit the church to enter into my life, and there's a reason for that, and that's because I don't like to let other people control who I am and who I will be. And so while I still attend Sunday Mass, and while I even taught Sunday school in high school, it never influenced who I am, because I don't let it. And people can say all that they want about me, and they can have their opinions and their reservations, but I don't care, because I am who I am, and I don't let other people control me like that.
I have to say this is just, it's so good to hear this because we hear so many stories of religious trauma. I think to hear stories like yours, and Enrique, especially for you to say these things, it's remarkable. And I think it completely changes the path that many other people can see themselves on. I always feel really lucky. I still am Catholic. My mother was actually a Dominican sister. And it never crossed my mind that being gay and being Catholic were in conflict, because I just made up my mind that that's not how we were raised. We were taught that God loves us. But it's so nice to hear this, because I feel like so many of the stories that I hear do not sound like yours. And I really hope more people hear this message, because it's critical.
Right. And the church doesn't have all the answers. But they still have values and important lessons that they can teach us. And knowing, the difference between bigotry and ethics and morals and values that transcend faith and law is important for people to understand.
Yeah. And to go back to the actual teachings directly out of the Bible, there was nothing but examples of acceptance by Jesus for the most marginalized, the most excluded, the most hated people. I mean, his only example of really getting angry was when people were doing bad things by the temple. And it had to do with money and not anybody's specific behavior. I think this is just amazing to hear. And I'm so glad that you're talking about this. So as we start to think about what happens next, how we create more inclusive spaces for people. Liz, you mentioned there were not a lot of resources for you during this process for you to look at. Was there anything that did resonate? And if the answer is there wasn't really anything that was very helpful, what did you need? What was necessary at that moment?
As a parent, I needed a safe place to ask questions, right? Because I didn't have all the answers, and this was so unknown. And I was like, I need a safe place where I can ask questions, and maybe a place where I can hear other parents share their story. There is something very therapeutic about listening to other parents share their journey, their story, and what they're processing. And then, because sometimes you can find that their story resonates with you. You're like, okay, right. I'm not alone in how I'm feeling or how I'm thinking. That's with anything, any support group, and I think that was very helpful for both Sam and I, is to be able to go to those parent support meetings in San Antonio that very year, because we were only there a year and a half before we moved to Okinawa, Japan. So we didn't get to go to a whole lot, but the few that we did go to made me realize that I have a whole lot more questions. And one of the things that I always tell Enrique is like, you're going to have to be very patient with me. And I'm going to ask a lot of questions, and I may say something wrong, but I want you to tell me if I'm saying something wrong. And he was always like, Mom, you can't say that, and I'd be like, okay, so what do I say? And, I was like, I'm old, I forget, you might have to remind me again. And I think that's one of the things as parents is have grace and patience with yourself and with those around you, because this is it's a learning curve, and still yet. Enrique's been out for 6-8 years now, and I'm still learning. There's still new things coming out. And so, I always go to the PFLAG website to learn something. But I think for Enrique, the difference in high school for him, because once we moved to Japan, there was no more parent support group. We didn't have anything, was the teachers. The teachers at Kubasaki High School were absolutely a godsend for him. They were empathetic, compassionate. They cared about their students. He was very, very fortunate to have some amazing, phenomenal educators that were there for him. And they sort of, I think, became kind of his safety and his support at school. And I am very grateful for those teachers. And as an educator myself, I truly believe that a teacher makes a huge difference. Sometimes by just lending a listening ear, or creating or having a safe place for that child to go, when they need to maybe decompress, or they need to kind of have a little bit of time away from everything. So for me, it was the teachers. And I cannot stress this enough we need to really provide and equip our educators with the knowledge and the know-how on what to do if you have an LGBTQ plus child or student in your classroom at your school. What can you do? You don't need a club, but you yourself can make a huge difference in a child's life.
What an amazing thing to talk about at a time when here in the US, we are seeing law after law after law being passed to limit the ability of teachers to talk about this, to even say some of the words, and to do exactly what you were saying, which we know is life-saving support. Enrique, for you, were there any resources that were helpful? Was there stuff that was helpful? Was there stuff that you wish you had had at the time that didn't exist?
Well, so like my mom said, I had my teachers, and that's a great resource to have, a great support net and mentors, really, who pushed me academically to succeed beyond my natural talents, and I love them because they really helped make me who I am today. But one of the things that I wish I had was access to more literature about the LGBTQ community and about its history, its political history, its cultural history. I wish I could have known more and have it in books or magazines or something, right? Because we see the mainstream portrayal of the community, and that's great and all. We're proud of who we are. But I would like to know more, about the history, the culture, where we come from, where the roots of the Pink Triangle come from, and what the Stonewall riots actually were and how that started, and all of those things. Those are important to me and to other members of this community, and I wish I could have known more.
And I think you're right, because right now with the big push for DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, representation matters. There's a big talk about school libraries and banning books and what can be allowed or not allowed. I think students and kids need to see themselves represented in the world around them. And like Enrique said, having those resources available for them to, you go to the library, oh, hey, this person like me, I can read, I can relate, it resonates with me. And for a child, that is huge, because then the child doesn't feel like, if it makes the child feel like I belong part of this community, not like I'm an outsider, right? And representation matters. It matters on so many levels, from elementary all the way to adulthood.
It really does. I read this great article about why we need to teach his LGBTQ history in schools. And the writer said something about how seeing yourself is an act of hope. And I think about, it wasn't until I was in college that I was ever exposed positively to LGBTQ people in literature or history or anything. And how would it have changed things had those examples been there? So I think your point is well taken. So we only have a couple of minutes left, and we like to end every show by giving people something to do. So both of you, I would love to know maybe one or two things that you think that sort of everyday people who are trying to be better allies, especially to families who are with military backgrounds, can do. And so maybe Enrique, anything that you would like people to start doing more of, maybe to demonstrate allyship?
Setting aside, the rules that society imposes on us, and being a friend, a brother, a sister, a mother, a father, a cousin, a grandparent, to whoever that person is. Just be who you're supposed to be to them, which is their family, their friend, their mentor, guidance, their support. Just do that.
Absolutely. I agree. I think listening more. I think listening to each other a little bit more, having those difficult conversations, asking questions. I think it's okay to ask the questions. I know when we go to our PFLAG board meetings, I'm always like, I have a question. I'm not sure if I understand this, because I know it's a safe place for me to ask a question. So I think being a lifelong learner, everything is evolving. Information is always constantly changing and coming out. I think taking the time to read, like Enrique said, about the history of the LGBTQ community. And I think it's so important. Listen, ask questions, inform yourself, and don't assume you know everything. and just be a good human being.
Practice humility. It really works. And those questions are incredible because sometimes it's in those answers that you suddenly see the humanity of people who you never saw a connection with.
Yeah.
It's so important. So Enrique, Liz, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for this conversation and for everything that you are bringing to the discussion. It personally gives me hope to hear stories like yours. So thank you both for being here today. I really appreciate everything that you do.
Thank you so much. And Enrique, I love you and I'm proud of you.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Can't ask for more than that. Thanks, Enrique. Well, everybody, that is another show, and that was a really good one. Make sure you check out the PFLAG publication, which is PFLAG. You can get it at pflag.org/@ease, which gives you the military publication that we were just talking about. You just heard my timer going off, telling me that I've talked too long, but we are really excited about that. One more reminder, if you want to lead with love, best way to start is by reading with love. Maybe you can read about some LGBTQ history. So remember to check out our program at pflag.org/readwithlove. We will be back next week with another great show. As we remind you at the end of every week, please run fast, laugh hard, and most of all, be kind. My name is Jean Marie Nevada. If you need help, please visit pflag.org today. See you next week, everybody.